But that's the main thing that I want to focus on, is that improvement in performance that we have seen in the last quarter. And of course, if you are Rishi Sunak, you must be regretting the decision to have called the elections so early. So maybe that's what happened. Okay, so what has contributed to that growth? The first thing to point out is that significant increase in domestic demand. But I want you to particularly focus on that solid green line on both of those charts. That's domestic sales. Domestic sales was, if you look at the components in terms of sectors, where we had growth significantly was in manufacturing. And manufacturing over the last 4 or 5 quarters was actually doing relatively poorly. We had a significant increase in manufacturing basic sales and manufacturing exports. That has had a significant turnaround. So manufacturing is a big contributor, as you saw in the previous slide, to growth in domestic sales. Services has been fairly stable. There has been some growth in services. Services is, as I keep saying again and again, well over 80% of our economy. And so services growth is actually quite significant and also adds to that overall performance. So on export sales, again, a turnaround in this quarter. Those numbers for export sales actually are quite high. And again, you can see that they have the highest down since the same time last year. So the second quarter of 2023 was when some of those balances actually were stable and then started declining. So 4 quarters of continuous decline in exports. Suddenly we have seen that improvement as well. Now that is of course not to say that everything is smooth so far as international trade is concerned. There are still some significant challenges, particularly for trade with the EU. It is something that you're all aware of. 46% of our exports go to the EU, 60% or so of our imports come from the EU. So again, that must be a priority for the new government in terms of resolving any trade barriers with the EU. But we have seen that improvement in both domestic sales and export sales. Now, in keeping with that, of course, recruitment activity has gone up. So more and more businesses are now reporting that they have added workforce in the last 3 months. But again, more importantly, they also expect to continue to recruit into this quarter. So we have seen that if you look at the chart on the left, additions to the workforce in the last 3 months, the black line, and then expected increases to the workforce in the coming 3 months. So as of June, the next quarter, again, that has shown an improvement. Likewise, capacity utilization has gone up, but only marginally. Sorry.
Is that across all sectors? Or
this is across all sectors for Greater Manchester, yes. Yeah, I didn't necessarily split it into sectors because then that would be...
Whether any particular growth sector, that's all.
Manufacturing.
Yeah.
So the running theme across the presentation, when I made it on the 27th of June, was on manufacturing. Is that strong turnaround that we have seen in manufacturing in the months of April and May. Well, starting March. Okay. So again, capacity utilization has gone up, but it is still only about 50%, and it is still lower than it was this time last year. And that's quite important because unless capacity utilization goes up, you're not going to see significant improvements in businesses investing in expanding capacity. And so we need that capacity utilization to probably be at 70-80%, which is what we would like to see generally. And that's where it has been pre-pandemic. It has consistently been between 70 and 80%, and in some quarters it has actually gone up beyond that as well. So that's the Greater Manchester QBS data. So just to give you a couple of other things as well. Business confidence, again, this should come as no surprise. We have seen an improvement in demand. We have seen an improvement in cash flow positions. We have seen an improvement in recruitment and capacity utilization. Business confidence has gone up as well. Now, there is a sort of slightly mixed picture when it comes to sectors on the ability of businesses to maintain their turnover and the ability of businesses or the optimism that they have in maintaining profitability. It's an issue that comes up again and again with the construction sector, which is margins and profitability. And so what we have seen is that although more and more construction sector businesses have reported that they are able to maintain their turnover, actually slightly smaller number of businesses have said in this quarter that they are actually able to maintain their profitability. That's our recurring concern. We did discuss that in extensive detail in previous 2 year sessions, but also in the construction summit that we had in May. On to business concerns, and this is interesting. So if you were looking at some of the commentators yesterday, they were saying that, oh, we have had strong growth, and so the case for holding interest rates at 5.25% is quite strong now. And so there are some commentators saying that there should not be a decrease in interest rates in August, it should perhaps be in September. Well, but the interesting thing to point out is that if you look at the last few quarters, perhaps even going earlier than that, when inflation was the number one business concern, and that was going up, actually there has been a reduction in the proportion of businesses who report inflation as their primary concern. Nonetheless, that solid green line is still businesses expressing concerns around inflation. So that still remains the number one concern for businesses. That is despite the decrease in consumer price inflation to about 2%, the decrease in producer price inflation, which predominantly affects manufacturers, to somewhere around 2%, but input prices for producer prices, inflation has actually gone down below 2% as well. But services inflation is actually quite high. Core inflation is still slightly on the higher side, so that might have influenced the bank's decision to hold interest rates last quarter. But again, the interesting thing is inflation is still the number one concern. But then if you follow that magenta line, which is concerns around interest rates, that is now going up. So there is clearly concern that there are financing pressures and liquidity problems amongst some businesses, at least. And there are, of course, other issues there, which I mentioned. Okay, so that brings me to sort of a very quick summary. A couple of things to mention. So things are looking better at the moment. Yesterday's data sort of confirms that as well. Again, I think the prospect of a different direction of travel, which is what most of us were expecting, has certainly influenced sentiment. But then there was some challenges, obviously, for a new government. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, around the balance between spending, not reducing taxes. This is what most parties have said so far, that there is not going to be an increase in tax hurdles. There is no going to be cut in public spending, and at the same time, we want to invest a huge amount of money. Now that is mutually exclusive, as many of you will understand, so we would need to see what the direction of travel is and what the specifics are. And a couple of interesting things, the National Wealth Fund, which was announced earlier in the week, this is predominantly for investment. And actually, if you look at other countries like Norway or the Middle Eastern countries who actually have sovereign funds, the UK's National Wealth Fund does not operate in that manner. The sovereign funds that some of these countries have is based on excess income, for want of a better word, that they get from particular revenues in some sectors. So in the case of Norway, it's oil. In most of the Middle Eastern countries, it is oil. But that's not what the UK's National Wealth Fund is. So do bear that in mind. This is not a sovereign wealth fund. This is essentially an additional pot of money for long-term capital investment projects. And it has to be financed through the books anyway. So this is capital account spending. So this is not additional money that it's not winged for. So that's one thing to bear in mind. So to finance some of these, we will need to raise money elsewhere, either by reducing public spending or by increasing taxation at some point in time. There are still some concerns around inflation. So the expectation is that public investment will now unlock sort of a 1:3 ratio of business investment. So for every £1 spent by the public sector, the private sector will spend £3. That's actually quite conservative. Think about it. And in some countries, the ratio is as high as £6 to £7. And then we have got to start discussing, if this National Wealth Fund does provide the investment returns that it does, then shouldn't HS2 come back into the agenda? Should Northern Powerhouse come back into the agenda? Should we not be investing in transportation to actually achieve some of our green and sustainability goals as well? So that, I think, is going to be one of the key questions for this new government. What infrastructure projects are we going to see directly here in the north and the northwest? But I'll leave it there just with one final point, which is that the growth forecasts have all been upgraded. So we were expecting growth of between 0.2 to 0.5% for this year. That's now been upgraded to between 0.6 and 0.9, 0.9% being the upside scenario. And for this, the quarter that just went past, growth of up to 0.5%. I think that's quite realistic now. So hand over back to you.
Yes, sir. Just a quick question on your point. There's always a degree of uncertainty after an election, that's for sure. But if you think about what's happened over the last 2 years. I think somebody posted on Twitter the 10 things that the Tories did that we should never forget, you know, the lies, the PPE and all this kind of stuff. And if you think of the animosity between Greater Manchester and government over all kinds of things, surely now with the Labour government, with a Labour-biased mayor, you would think that some of that uncertainty should be taken away because it should be easier to do some of these infrastructure projects now.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I think that there was a lot less animosity. In fact, the Secretary of State for Transport was in Manchester yesterday. I did have the opportunity to go and meet her as well. You know, there was clearly support for devolution. There was support for some of the things that we are doing in GM. They view GM as having been a pioneer in things that they would like to replicate in other parts of the country. So all of that is positive, and you know, this clear demonstration of faith. And of course, we'll have Lisa from GMCA will probably be able to speak in a lot more detail and a lot more clarity than I ever can on these matters. But yes, I agree with you. But I think the key concern for us is that investment money. Where does that investment money going to come from?
But that's always the question.
That's always the question. Yes. Emma?
Are there any more questions? Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris, who's going to talk through the results locally and highlight some key appointments.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, good morning everyone. It's good to see everyone here today. Again, just to re-emphasise the point, what we're trying to do here today is just set the context going forward in the next 5 years. So for the economic bit, things are looking a lot better than they were 6 months ago, 9 months ago. What I'm going to do for a session for me today is just go through what we're looking at from the point of view of the national state of the parties, and also put a bit of a local context on that as well, because they were when I use the word amazing, I'm not sure any political bias, but we were an amazing set of results, because leading up to the election, you know, the polls and everything, people were saying surely it's not going to be that side of the majority. Oh, my hands up, I was saying that as well, because people were saying, you know, well, you're involved in politics, you know, what do you think? I've given up predicting politics. I did that in 2016 when we, it's a real, you know, outlier. Looking at some of the constituents, really interesting sets of results. But basically, that's the number of seats, that's around 650 seats declared. Buys the workforce, the swings and one thing and another. But we have 25 Labour MPs and 2 Lib Dems. The 2 Lib Dem MPs are in Cheadle against the Grove. They were key target seats. You've obviously in Stockport, you've got a Lib Dem leader in Mark Hunter, so they've always traditionally been Lib Dem seats. They were both gained Conservatives that won them in the last election. And everywhere else where we have the surprising results in 2019, I'm thinking here about Leeds and places like that, the Red Wall, as it's called, that's been wiped out completely. So now we do not have any Conservative MPs in Greater Manchester. I've been doing this job 21 years now, and I can never remember that happening before. And I'm thinking the whole time that Greater Manchester has been an entity, there's never been a period when we've had no Conservative MPs in Greater Manchester. So in total, there's been 7 Labour gains from the 2019 result, all from Conservatives. Like I said, we've got a range of new MPs and new constituencies. I can share a table of them with everybody here today, where I've highlighted where, for example, the standing MP has stepped down and a new MP has taken over, and what the breakdown is of that, and also the new constituencies as well. But like I said, don't worry too much around that. Some of the interesting things, 27 constituencies, just over half, Reform came second. Okay? Those numbers at the end where you've had the smallest majority, so just under 5,400 in Makerfield, and the largest majority, 15,101 in Salford and Eccles. So they're not as though Reform are breathing, you know, it's down to hundreds or anything like that. But in 14 constituencies, Reform came second. When you actually look at where they are, some of that bears a real big correlation to the areas that voted Leave in 2016. As you can see where those areas, there's still that sentiment in them. And some of those areas you will class as traditional Labour voting areas. So all that stuff, you why do you remember it's back 8 years after the referendum, and people were saying, this is a protest, these are people getting left behind, blah, blah, blah. Those sentiments are still out there. Maybe not expressed as highly as they were in the Brexit referendum, but those sentiments are still out there. People are feeling that they're being ignored, they're not happy with the current system, etc., etc. That's a big thing for government to contend with. Like I said, I'm not making any political points here in any way, shape or form, but that is something, okay? We may only have 5 MPs, but that is something that in people's thought process and willingness to go. May see, George Galloway was defeated in Rochdale by Paul Law for Labour. I believe he didn't even turn up for the council results or whatever, so read into that what you will. But again, that independence, the British Workers' Party, or I can't remember the exact name, but that Workers' Party still got votes, not just in Rochdale, but in other areas as well. So now we're beginning to see a bit of fragmentation, I think, in British politics. I think we are moving away from that two-party state, as he said, for 400 seats for Labour. But start to look at those other parties there, and I think one thing we'll hear again and again and again is around the proportional representation there. Now again, if you're a government in power, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. It's never really going to go anywhere, to be brutally honest, otherwise we'd have done it probably years ago. But that will become an insistent cry, I think, from a lot of people around that. So John Galloway is out, he's taking his hat and go wherever. And as I said, no Conservative MPs in Greater Manchester, which, like I said, is unusual. Final bit on this is just to have a look at some of the key people that we've got. We've got 4 MPs that sit in Cabinet. Sarah's Lorena, for Ashton and Langford, the constituencies in brackets. She's the Deputy PM and also the Communities Housing and Local Government Secretary. Don't use the word levelling up anymore, otherwise you're going to get banned. It's got without levelling up, okay? Maybe not what levelling up is, but certainly the phrase. So the department and was for Communities Housing and Levelling Up, or whichever way around it was, is now the Ministry for Communities Housing and Local Government. So levelling up is no more anything. As Jim McMahon said, it's a gimmick. Well, I think there's quite a few other gimmicks that maybe came from the previous administration that probably will be looked at as well. Come back to that later on. Sandra Lorena is in there. Jonathan Reynolds, still is 9 MP, Business Secretary. Lisa Nally, this was a bit of a surprise from Wigan. She's my MP, she's now the Culture Secretary. And Lucy Powell from Manchester Central is the Leader of the Commons. That is quite an important role because she will oversee all the business that goes through the Commons, so votes, everything like that is Lucy Powell's responsibility now. So she sits in Cabinet, that's quite a critical bit of the mechanism of government. We've got some junior ministers, Jim McMahon, Oldham West, Shepperton Robinson, that's the new constituency. He's our minister working in Angela Rayner's team. Mike Kane, with Sean Sale East, is on Department for Transport, and Andrew Weston, Stretford and Urmston, he's working in DWP. I may have missed them because this week has just been announcements after announcements on one thing or another, so there may be a couple of others I may have missed in junior ministerial positions, but that's where it is. And that is something we should really be taking advantage of. It's not to say we ignored it beforehand under the previous administration because we didn't really have that sort of level of input directly into government, but it's something that really does make it a lot easier to get points across and make sure that they understand what's going on in the business community.
There is something just important as a chamber, we have some strong dialogue with these people that are super critical.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't agree more. We know these people, whether or not we know, so we need to put it on a bit more of a formal footing, I guess, really. So that's where things stand. Like I said, there may be a couple of others I've missed. There's a lot of stuff being thrown out by government at the present moment in time, so that may be something to change. But that's where we are, that's where we're standing. Greater Manchester, we've got our MPs, our key positions, and some of the things as well that dropped out from this election, which I think we'll see more of in the future around that split of votes, etc., etc. So I'll hand back to Emma now for the next part of the assembly.
So at the start of the meeting, I election, and we thought it would be a good idea today to assess what, if any, changes may come about with the Labour government, and also to the Prime Minister meeting all the mayors this week to look at whether Greater Manchester is going to be in a different position or what we should be in relation to the devolution deal. So we're delighted today to have Lisa and Kay with us from the Combined Authority, and we're going to talk to them about what the election means. And can I just remind everybody, Chatham House rules apply to the questions, etc. Thank you.
We don't have any slides.
We don't have any slides.
So we're having two first.
So we're going to make a few remarks, and then actually we're interested in hearing your reactions to the election as well, and to some of the key things that have been announced this week. So we have more of a conversation, I suppose. So yeah, Chris has already covered a lot of what I was going to say.
All right. There you go. No problem.
around the election results. I guess the only other comments I would make is that in terms of the overall results, Labour obviously has a very big majority, so 91 Labour MPs would need to rebel in Parliament for a bill or a motion not to be put forward, so that's pretty significant. And so the government can put forward an ambitious programme for the new government. I think another thing to bear in mind though is that the Labour campaign did focus on marginal seats, so you do have quite a few new MPs with smaller majorities in places that weren't Labour previously, and quite a lot of them are on the edge of cities. First one that comes to mind to me is Macclesfield, which hasn't been proposed Labour this time, and where there may be more tensions around things like planning and things like that. So some of that may come to have some impacts on policies. But at the moment I can't see that. Looks like they've got a very ambitious programme for government. In terms of the cabinet, the only other comment I would also make is that 50% of the cabinet seats are MPs from the north as well. So we've got a Greater Manchester representation. There's also a huge representation from across the north of the country. So you can expect that to really change and feature in cabinet debates as well. We've heard that Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy and Johnny Reynolds have indicated that they want to spend time in the government footprint that is in Manchester, so to have offices in Manchester. That's also great in terms of exposure to the city and the city region as well. And I think 4 visits have already been suggested, planned, that will happen this week. So we're really sort of getting some traction and impact already. I think another helpful appointment just to point out as well for Greater Manchester, which it might go sort of under the radar, is the appointment of Sir Patrick Vallance as the Science Minister. He knows Greater Manchester quite well. He has good relationships with the leads of our universities. So again, it's another really good connection into government forward. Chris mentioned the breakfast meeting that happened this week with the Metro Mayors. So on Tuesday, there was a breakfast meeting with all the Metro Mayors, the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. And this is an incredibly positive signal, I guess a signal across government, a signal to the civil service and to other ministers that regions and places are the priority and are really key to delivering the government's agenda. To do that on the second sort of weekday of the Prime Minister's first week really is a really strong signal, and from that we can see that they're prioritising devolution, more local powers as well. And I think that the other thing that came through from the last few days, and was certainly part of that meeting, was the emphasis on the growth mission and how that's going to be the forefront of the focus of government and part of their agenda. And so I think that's obviously for a number of reasons. I think that was probably one of the factors, sort of the stagnating performance around productivity over the last decade or so. It's probably one of the factors that contributed to the Conservatives losing votes in the election, but it's also going to be how the government can create some headroom in the finances of the public sector to be able to do ambitious things. And I think it's been clear since Labour released, I think it's a document called Power and Partnerships back in about March time, that local places and having local growth plans is going to be key to how they want to drive growth in the national economy. And we've had correspondence with government this week around the intention to start work with us soon in partnership on those local growth plans. In terms of what's been published already about those local growth plans, there's a few elements that seem to be coming through. So they should be addressing what's constraining growth in places, what's holding economies back, getting the fundamentals of our economy right. That was a phrase that was used in the speech that the Chancellor made this week as well. As well as addressing opportunities for growth as well. And also that these local growth plans will inform a new national industrial strategy. So there's all things to be bearing in mind over the next few weeks and months. And also, so government have indicated that these local growth plans would be put on a statutory basis. So that would mean sort of local growth, local economic development has the same legal basis as things like social care in localities, which means that funding and powers and functions around encouraging our economies to grow would be more resistant to things like spending cuts or changes in national policy in the future, potentially. I think I can say that Greater Manchester's leaders are going to want to move quickly on working on a local growth plan. As you all are probably aware, we've got a really great understanding of our economy in Greater Manchester through things like the Chamber's quarterly economic survey and the work that we do together around understanding the resilience of our economy, but also through things like the big reviews of our economy that we've been doing over the last 15 years or so. We had the Manchester Independent Economic Review actually in 2009. We followed that up with the Independent Prosperity Review in 2019, and then there's been further work with the Resolution Foundation since then as well. We also have plans and strategies in place already focused on local growth. So you may have forgotten, but I have never forgotten, because it was my first job at the Combined Authority was to write the Greater Manchester Local Industrial Strategy and negotiate that with the Theresa May government and agree it in 2019. So we had that local industrial strategy, and we've had it for 5 years, and we've stuck to it, and we've aligned our investment, our policy and our resources against the long-term priorities in that strategy. So we already know from an industrial perspective some of the key things we need to do to keep transforming and growing our economy. We also have long-standing plans like the 2040 Transport Plan, our spatial plan, Places for Everybody plan, and we also have structures like the mayoral development corporations as well, which are encouraging regeneration and growth in our towns and doing some great things there. And then we've also got the track record of delivering on things like bus franchising, health and care devolution, and things like working well as well. And I guess the stats are starting to show that what we've been doing in the city region is working. Has really positive information this morning, but there were some Office of National Statistics stats out. At steady rates over the first 2 decades of this century, and that's because of those long-term decisions to invest in our infrastructure, in the skills, in the people of the city region, and they're starting to show results. I think I'll let Kate speak, because I realise I've been speaking for quite a while now, but a couple of things that I'm sort of looking out for as a policy nerd are sort of how the growth mission is going to be organised. So it looks like this is going to be really driven over by Treasury at number 10. And I think that is essential, and it would be great if we keep that sort of focus and attention from the centre and power as well. There's going to be mission boards for each of the missions, and it would be great to see regional representation on those mission boards if possible. The other thing I'm looking out for is how quickly government wants to move on the national industrial strategy as well, and sort of pulling together a new industrial strategy council. The last government had an industrial strategy council from about 2017 to 2021, I think, and that had Greater Manchester representation on it through Jürgen Meyer, former CEO of Siemens UK, but also chair of our Graphene and Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, and Nancy Rothwell, current president of University of Manchester. So I'd like to see a repeat of that if we can. I think there's definitely some learning as well from the last industrial strategy that we'd like to engage with government on too. And then I think the last thing I'll say is that this does look like a really business-friendly, business-positive government. So really interested to hear from you in terms of what you've heard this over the last week, what you think the opportunities are with the new government around devolution and around improving local economies as well.
I'll shut up, sorry. I'm relatively new to international humanities. It's lovely to be here. It's the first time I've been in the building with your incredible art collection. I used to work in central government, but don't take responsibility for any of the dreadful things that happen. And I'm a devolution policy nerd, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of reading the rooms that I've been trying to do over the last few months about actually, whilst we've heard lots of really positive talk from the shadow cabinet, on the theory of decentralisation, the idea that people in Whitehall do not make the best decisions for our people and our businesses, and the Power and Partnerships document was very good on that, really talked the talk. So there are a lot of people like me, and hopefully people in this room, getting very hopeful. I think it's still too early to say for sure that what we see over the next 5 years is a government that's really committed to getting power out of Whitehall and into local leadership and local, the sort of local knowledge that we have here in this room. But I do think, and I'm pleased to be able to say that today, I do think I actually feel much more confident now after these first couple of weeks. I think that we can see real positive commitment to working with mayors, working with the regional leaders. With that breakfast, where it actually sounded like what the Prime Minister said really felt like a real personal belief. When he talked about it being a real personal belief in him that people with skin in the game make better decisions, and that didn't sound like lines written by civil servants like myself. That sounded like something he believed, so that was a good sign. As Lisa says, several cabinet ministers have already been up to Manchester. Transport Secretary, Deputy Prime Minister were here yesterday. So I think, I would say, the early signs are good. And in terms of what's coming down the line on a devolution perspective, talked about the local growth plan, which they're already saying will be owned, co-designed, co-developed by local leaders and local communities, local businesses, which is brilliant. There's also the Take Back Control bill, which is a bit more mysterious to me. I would love to know if anyone has sort of ideas as to what we might, from a business perspective, want to see in there. That feels like something that might be more about the rest of the country than Greater Manchester, if I'm terribly honest. Because that's talking about expanding devolution, making sure that there are powers over transport, skills and housing, and we've kind of got what we need, I think. So that's a bit of a watch this space for me. And then the third thing I would say about what's coming down the line is the single settlement and the Trailblazer deal that we agreed with last government. Now, I negotiated that on the other side of the table, but I'm feeling really nervous. I think it's because I don't usually use my phone. The Trailblazer deal was really, really, really good. The cornerstone of it was the single settlement and the multi-year funding approach that it's given us. I would really like to see this government take the opportunity to expand that, to bring more into the single settlement, I would like to see the announcements this week on employment support turn into devolution of employment support funding into the civil settlement. So that would be a really good start to see that. And then I'll just finish by talking about how we're engaging with the new government. So the Mayor has already written a letter to the Prime Minister setting out 4 Greater Manchester ambitions to contribute to the growth mission. And those are ambitious. So if I were to describe them to you, you'll see what I mean. He's talking about building more than our fair share of the national housing target. So the national housing target is 1.5 million houses, which is massive because we haven't built that many houses a year since the 70s. And he's offering that in this parliamentary term, Greater Manchester will build 75,000 houses, which is more than our fair share of local housing need, more than our fair share of that 1.5. The ambitious target on employment rate, which I know will matter to many of you, is the national mission is to raise the employment rate to 80%. That's from a national starting point of about 75. Our national start point is 71.9, so much lower, so much more ground for us to cover if we're going to raise the employment rate to 80%. But the Mayor has said that's our ambition. With the kind of employment support devolution, the complete reworking of JCP and careers into something that's much more focused on work. He believes that we can do that, and I think that we've got definitely the right partnerships in place in Greater Manchester to give that a really, really good go. But we know how far many of these people are from the labour market. So the ambition is to support 150,000 people each year, closer to the labour market. There's a growth target that he's put forward, which is incredibly ambitious, which is that we would, GDP per capita of Greater Manchester would match the best GDP per capita growth of the best performing G7 country. Just because, you know, in Greater Manchester, that's the sort of comparisons we like to draw internationally. We're not like other cities, we're like other countries. And then the fourth target that the Mayor has set out to the Prime Minister in this letter that he sent was about rail integration, which we know how important connectivity is, and he's asking for the integration of 8 rail lines into the B network, which he says would reduce the government subsidy on those lines and increase patronage by 1.2 million. So those are 4 very big, very sort of pragmatic, tangible promises, if you like, that the Mayor has put forward to the Prime Minister, which in the proper tradition of Greater Manchester devolution are also about, please then give us the powers and the functions and the fundings and the, you know, the backing to go ahead and do all those things. So he's gotten straight out of the starting blocks with that letter, and that's been like the major engagement that we've had, sort of setting up our stall and what we think we can achieve. But then the major thing that is coming down the line is the growth plan.
Thank you very much, that was great. So, over to questions, Stuart.
I don't think I need that. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Nice to see Poacher turn gamekeeper and enjoying the role. Kate, thank you very much. I just think it'd be really interesting to get a view from the room, feel the temperature of the room, in terms of who feels more positive now compared to the beginning of last week on the future for business, notwithstanding everything that Sue has told us in terms of the stats from quarter 2. Can we just have a really simple hands in the air for who feels more positive about business as a result of the activity of the last week? Probably more telling, is there anybody that doesn't feel more positive about business? Is that 100%? Interesting.
I think everything's relative to them. I mean, probably all got in our minds still the last months, years of this, so I think I think what you said is a good point, yeah, good science, but it's all about implementation.
The interesting bit, I think, is around, in my mind, is how you mentioned about this statutory implication around the growth plan. It seems a really sensible brief to make part of what we've got to do. But how does that fit in an area like Greater Manchester, where we've got the devolution in a single settlement? Because you know as well as I know, we've been around this for some time, you will get bits that will go up against each other. If you're looking at some far-flung rural bit of England or something like that, it may work, but turn around and go, it's fantastic because we've got something now in place that we didn't have before. Has that been taken into account where we are in Greater Manchester, and will that fit fit in. I guess that's the
That was
core
my,
design bit, isn't it?
that was my big worry with the growth plan. I just sound like I'm worried constantly, but that was my big worry with the growth plan was, well, we already have landed this principle that actually greater flexibility of funding is really essential for local leadership, and the idea that there might be a sort of separate conversation happening on the growth plan to a single settlement just felt very worrying. So I think that it does seem really clear from the letter we had from Angela Rayner yesterday morning that that's actually one conversation, and that the conversation they want to have with the Mayor and local leaders in Greater Manchester is, tell us what you already know about your barriers to growth. We already know that you've got plans, plural, to be growing the economy of Greater Manchester. Again, it's all about the proofs in the pudding, but it seems like a commitment to quite a light touch approach to what this growth plan can be. And then to make sure that it is a conversation not happening separately in a silo, but is thinking about, well, how does this single multi-year funding settlement be the mechanism by which you actually achieve those plans, so that those things will be matched up together. Is that one of their teams?
Yeah, I would agree. So in the, I'm not sure how much people know about the single settlement, and it is a very technical area of policy that I have to revise myself on quite often. But in the single settlement work that we've been doing with government, one of the sort of pillars of that, where government has said, okay, Greater Manchester, you can have the functions around this, includes a function called the local growth and place pillar. So we're already engaged in a conversation with government around what do we need to be able to do, have control over, what flexibility do we need to drive local growth and place. But our approach to the single settlement has been a holistic approach, and to work across, to think about growth in the same way and at the same time as we're thinking about net zero, or we're thinking about reforming our public services. And that's been the tradition of how we work across Greater Manchester. We don't see the economy as something separate over here. We see it as connected to people and places and quality of life. So I think Kate's right that there does need to be some alignment and thinking through about how that will work.
Just in the local plans, how local is local? Is that local authority level, or is that Greater Manchester?
So for places that have mayoral combined authorities, it would be mayoral combined authority level. Yeah. For places that don't, I think it's going to be a bit more complicated.
Thank you. Peter McDermott, University of Salford. This is chatting about rules, isn't it? So maybe we can all smile and grin a little bit. I'm certainly smiling a little bit. The question, I think, it's for Lisa. I didn't know who drafted the Greater Manchester Industrial Strategy in 2016.
I started writing it in January 2019.
I am a construction procurement professor at Salford, but a policy one, so really enjoyed the Greater Manchester Industrial Strategy. I was using that at the time, but alongside the National Construction Sector deal. I had the two there. And the third strand to that was obviously the mission-based approach and the Mario Mazzucato and stuff and all that. So we had those three things at the time, and there's a lot of work we were doing at the time to try to map those in. So delighted that you're saying you're still using the Greater Manchester Industrial Strategy. What work could it be looking to see what might be coming out of government around the national deal, like I was looking at the National Construction Sector deal then, and then what can we do around the mission-based strategy for my passion, which is the construction sector?
Yeah, so the things that in the sort of public domain at the moment about how Labour are thinking about a national, well, the government are thinking about a national industrial strategy, some of the elements are, I guess, established thinking. So they've started to identify key sectors where they think they need to work in partnership with business. They've also identified that an industrial strategy isn't just about glamorous, sexy, innovative things. It's also about the foundations of the fundamentals of the economy. That they've taken it in a slightly different way, though, than the previous government and the previous national industrial strategy, because they're also talking about it as something that is key to the security of the country. So they're putting bigger policy goals against it as well. And then I know that the mission-based approach has obviously influenced their thinking, not just about the economy, but about the whole of how they want to work government. So some of those elements I think are really familiar to people who've been working on industrial strategy or researched it, but I think there are going to be new elements here. I think they've said the first step will be this Industrial Strategy Council, and I think from who's on that council, we'll start to be able to see what the mechanisms are that they're going to use. Is that helpful?
That's really helpful. If nothing else, really useful for the research work, but means we won't have to rewrite 2 million new PowerPoints for teachers.
Can I talk about the impact? Really like to have with that, and also the extent to which that change in education might be more national.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of the MBAC. I thought it was misunderstood by national government as being about creating a new qualification and trying to compete with GCSEs, when it was always about trying to signpost people to good jobs in their area. And that has always been the stated ambition of every government on skills, but as everyone knows, skills policy is the most churning national policy, apart from possibly local growth and local industrial strategy policy, which seems to be a close second to me in how often we change direction. I think the Mayor is feeling really confident that we're setting that direction of travel here in Greater Manchester. We're cracking on with the MBAC. He has spoken to Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education, about it on multiple occasions. She seems to be a fan. It seems to align with their stated ambition on technical education, and we'll just have to see to what extent Greater Manchester's a pioneer in the technical education space. I'm really hoping that we get more control over post-16 skills. That seems an untapped bit of what we're able to do technically and legally. But what we can do in a convening space with yourselves is really powerful, regardless of the powers that we have.
Just something anecdotally, I work in the construction sector. We were concerned before the election was even called that things had slowed down. So our 2 big clients are the NHS and the DFE. It seems like the plug has come out and the pipe is now starting to be a bit freed on schools. We've got an inquiry come straight in off the DFE pipeline. Is that just things starting to happen normally, or are we going to see a return to the major projects, the hospital sector and the school sector starting to come through, and then the new government will work out what extra that it might need because there's pressures on budgets and everything?
I can't say for sure. I would imagine that things get locked up in the Whitehall system, and that can then have impact further down the pipeline, and that might start to be unlocked when people feel they can make decisions. I think earlier we made a point about will things be easier now? I think that there's still no real fiscal headroom, so I would be surprised. But I would be prepared to be surprised.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, just a quick one. With all this opportunity and all this challenge that you're facing as a combined authority, what skills are you lacking? What gaps do you have? Yeah, what skills gaps and how are you filling them?
That's actually something that we're doing a massive program of organisational change and just looking at ourselves, which we're calling Gmcc Next Phase, which is recognising that Greater Manchester devolution has always been on a journey and has always been constantly developing, but we just wanted to take the opportunity of this new approach to funding, which is the single settlement, or I think as the government will call it the integrated settlement, but it's the same thing. We wanted to take that opportunity to look at ourselves and actually look at, do we have the strategic capability to be supporting all of our authorities and the greater GM system to be making the most of these opportunities. So that's actually a piece of work that we're doing, and it's a really way how working is.
Of course, a question online, so from Sharon, do you have any plans on the changes to the apprenticeship organisation? Is there anything to be named?
No, I don't have any clarity on that, sorry Sharon.
Any more questions? No? Well, thank you very, very much for this. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand back to Chris for our what to watch. So here we're going to far and to look at the alignment between our application of business tasks and also the plan for growth.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Lisa, for that. It was quite useful just to get that local bit, because things are changing and we need to make sure we're aware of that. Some of this you have already heard, so I won't dwell too long. We mentioned previously around the idea that the government is approaching this through a series of missions. It's 5 missions in total. I'm not sure 6 for some reason, not on the thing, but anyway, there we go. First one is to kickstart economic growth. Growth is the key bit. We've heard already about growth plans, national industrial strategy, things like that. Because let's be honest, if you are not going to raise taxes and you're going to keep public spending, you're going to have to raise that revenue from somewhere. And one way that the government is saying is we're going to grow the economy, and that will then ultimately bring more money in to do what they need to do. Where you get that money to start that from, of course, is another issue, but we'll look at that. So this is lifted straight from the Labour manifesto. Now I'm not going to go through it, there's 109 pages of it, so don't worry about that. What I have done is picked out the key points and I've also highlighted where they intersect with our campaign for business document. Because what we mustn't do now is let all that work go to waste that we spent 6-7 months working on ahead of the mayoral election and ahead of the general election, identifying from yourselves and other businesses what they actually need from the new government to succeed. So we can't lose that, or how does it fit with what we've seen so far from the government. Brief overview of what the key points are. Some mentioned about the National Wealth Fund, 7.3 billion over the Parliament. He mentioned the £3 private money, so we have £1 public money in that. This mentioned about the planning reform, 1.5 million new homes, that was mentioned in the Chancellor's speech, and also the devolution of power across England that was mentioned at the meeting on Tuesday. So again, the government is seeing these things being absolutely critical alongside the Industrial Strategy Council as to bringing together that partnership to make this work. A couple of other things in the manifesto, and again these are where we get into the sort of more detailed bit. It will return full expensing, which was from the previous Chancellor, I think, and others before all of that. And that's around that investment bit. As we're saying around investment in business, we've seen it slacking off a little bit, you get the odd spike or whatever, but that was brought in really to help boost that investment. 10-year infrastructure strategy, 10-year R&D budget, and the Chancellor, she used the phrase a decade of national renewal. So this isn't going to be a quick fix. They are setting the scene already that this is going to be beyond the term of this Parliament and into the next one. So we don't expect any quick wins with that. It's a great phrase, a one-liner in the manifesto. In England, Labour will replace business rates. That's it. Now, again, as long as I've been doing this job, every government has said they're going to replace business rates, they're going to tweak them, this, that and the other. It will be interesting to see what that looks like. Now, whether there's anything there that we can start to weave in to those local growth plans, where we've got more control over the financial bit and how we spend that would be quite important. But again, that was one of the points that we put in the campaign for business document, along with these, around having that longer term focus on what you need to do to invest and how you get that investment. So these are all points that we've already highlighted there. Great British Railways, this has been around, I don't know how many years, because the previous government started it, stopped it, restarted it, they decided to make it look like something else. But Labour said they will bring Great British Railways into it. It's basically going back to where you're cutting out all the various bits of organisations that are involved in running the railways and making it more unified. Exactly British Rail, if anyone can remember that, but it's running along those sorts of lines where you've got the operators, you've got Network Rail, you've got all sorts of other people involved in getting the railways to work. And again, there's another interesting point in that manifesto document. Mayors will have a role in designing services in their areas, and we just heard over the last couple of days around the intention and the ambition of Andy Byrne to bring 8 railway lines into the B network. So this is where what's in the manifesto is starting to work. And again, we've said you need to sort out the rail network in this country because quite frankly, it's not been really fit for purpose for time. The other mission, one of the other missions, sorry, is for the UK to be a clean energy superpower. I'm not seeing any further details on this, like I said, there's that much stuff coming out at present, you can miss a press release or whatever it is. But the idea in general is to set up Great British Energy to cut bills for good and capitalise with 8.3 billion over the Parliament. This figure, this one, is really interesting. 650,000 new, high-quality jobs, clean energy, by 2030. I would suggest that is completely unachievable. I'm not one for pessimism, you know that. That is just silly numbers, to be quite honest. If that is to be delivered, there's going to have to be some very, very rapid activity taking place on that. I'm not saying you shouldn't aim for it, but that seems a little bit ambitious as an understatement. The law wants to slash fuel poverty. That's important, but just bear in mind, if the country is going to be building 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years, quite right, we've not built that many since the 1970s, and they're all going to be energy efficient, and you've got to do the retrofit, well, that will probably give you 650,000 new jobs, because you need that many people to do it. But where are they going to get trained? We can't call now. So something really has got to start to move on this, and that potentially cost money. I'm not having a pop at anybody here, just setting realism with some of these things, and just maybe we've got to think about it. Speaking of education, this is called breaking down barriers to opportunity as a mission. So I wasn't quite sure what it meant at first, but obviously when you read what's in the content, you do get that clear. Recruit 6,500 new expert teachers in key subjects, 3,000 new primary school-based nurseries upgrading spaces in primary school, modern curriculums, young people are ready for work and life, high-quality pensions to specialist technical colleges. And there is this talk, and again I've not seen any announcements from the FE and the new Secretary of State, that the setting up of a new body called Skills England, which begins to pull all this together. One of the important things, and again we mentioned this very clearly in the campaign for business bit, it will work with the Migration Advisory Committee to plug skills gaps. Under the previous administration, the very mention of migrant labour to plug work gaps and skills gaps, it just was a no-no. We wouldn't get anywhere with it. The current government is saying, right, we've got to stop this bit over here operating independently of this bit over here and bring it together. If we recognise, especially in things like social care, that we need economic migrants to come and do those jobs until we've trained enough people to do those jobs from this country, then we've got to work with that. So I think that's quite critical coming together of some important things.
Not just training them, Chris, it's paying them a rate in this country that will make them want to work in the sector.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, Clive, yeah, the pay in that is critical.
Without any tax rise.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't do that.
What's that?
I don't do that.
How do we do that? You don't have to put taxes on the level.
It's easy.
I'm not a woman, But that is, it's a very serious point. We're these things, it's brilliant. We'll think about it in the background, because there will be some real big headaches potentially coming down the line about some of this stuff happens. That sounds great. How do you actually make it happen? Mentioned already, mentioned Levy, change that to go for skills like we put that in. And this idea of FE colleges becoming tech excellence colleges, or back to the old techs, as remember, what goes around comes around, doesn't it? No idea what that looks like. Are they new institutions? Are they just going to read from FE colleges? Not quite sure, really, to be quite honest. But a lot of that, again, was listed in that campaign for business. So stuff we've been asking for, now we've got to make sure that that can be delivered. Again, recruit 6,500 college principal or head teacher now in this room. What is the biggest issue is recruitment and retention of staff. And the 6,500 and 3,000 new primary school nurseries. So again, there's some big ambitious stuff in there. It's how you actually make that happen in real life. These are the other three, like I said, for some reason there's 5 missions, but there's 6 titles that I found in the thing. Britain Reconnected, NATO, Paralliance, new trade agreements, I'll come back to that one in a minute. Building NHS fit for the future, there's another 8,500 additional mental health staff. That again is a critical area that we can't recruit and train people fast enough now at the present moment in time. And then there's a bit there around serving the country, which, like I say, is about that relationship with developed nations, Law 16, and other things around the House of Lords, etc. A bit more general, I had a chance to speak to Monday, the mayor's meeting on Tuesday, we've heard about that. As I said before, levelling up has gone, it's now local government, so it's the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. I'm not quite sure what the difference between a ministry and a department is, to be quite honest, but heck, they've changed the name completely, so they've gone, levelling up has gone. And the King's speech is next week on the 17th of July, when some of this stuff may come out in a little bit more detail. A couple of points. Trade needs to be a lot stronger. Again, that's an understatement. It feels a bit lost. It's not in there. We mentioned about new trade, new free trade deals. Well, you would do, wouldn't you? But what about existing trade? We heard from Subaru before the stats around what trade gets put to the EU. And it's no use just saying, well, we can do it from a volume basis. If it's so impossible and costly to do, what's the point? That's your biggest overseas market. This is about, oh, let's rejoin the EU or anything like that. Well, that has got to be reworked, and it's got to be a lot clearer. And this is something we're going to pick up on as well. To be quite honest, we've not heard really anything about that up to now. And right through the election campaign, it was almost like it was kryptonite. People just backing away from it. You've got to face that as reality, because that's all the business of.
I'm just interested in views on this. I mean, your answer was toxic. I think disappointingly so, that any growth strategy, the whole thing is based on growth. And the marginal gains that you'll get through changing veterinary regulations, chemical sector regulations, there's an interesting idea what called dynamic alignment, where you don't just commit to comply with EU rules, but you comply with future EU rules. Now, they're all good things, but they're marginal gains. Now, by the most conservative estimate, we would have lost about 4% of GDP as a result of moving because of the EU. You know, this has got to be set in train and not ignored. And you can't push this into the long run anymore. And nonsense talk about trade deals with the likes of Australia and New Zealand. Well, no, but they're telling. Absolutely telling. And the truth is, certainly Germany wants a much closer relationship now within. France will always take its position as, we'll make you pay to come back in. Because that will always happen. But the truth is, we've got to be more actively ambitious, and we must drive this narrative. It's utterly vital. And people will start to say, oh, you're being ridiculous. Just before the election, Starmer said, I don't see us joining vigilantly or customs unit in my lifetime. 2 weeks before the vote. Jonathan Reynolds repeated that. We have got to not accept that. It is unacceptable. It will damage this country long term economy. You can't try and strategy without thinking about that.
Absolutely. Like I said, we're going to be picking this up as an absolute critical must-do, to be quite honest. Productivity impact, obviously that's a big one. You've got probably heard a little bit around productivity getting that growth. Link between employees and skills needs. There's huge investments in jobs potentially, but we're training 650,000 new jobs, so they're going to have the right skills to cope for now and in the future. Obviously, the work we've been doing with the local skills improvement plan is critical to that. We're doing a little piece of work around that now in the context of what those future jobs will look like. And it's not just the type of jobs, we're having to really ramp that up from a volume perspective as well, if it's going to deliver what's needed here within that. But again, in all the parties' manifestos, there's no link whatsoever between we're going to do this amount of skills training and it will respond to what employers need. So it's been done in isolation again, which is going back several years. So that is critical. Infrastructure. Again, we've heard a lot, and again, the Transport Secretary was here, and there's a lot going on at present around new Liverpool, Manchester Railway Board, and things like that. It was interesting how you've got without levelling up as a gimmick. I would suggest that Network North falls into that category as well. It was neither, as Andy Burnham and others have said, Network or in the North. We're filling potholes in Plymouth, which is absolutely nonsense.
But from that,
Yeah, but from that, it was quite good. That's the gimmick if ever I saw one. So that, I don't think it's days of the numbers to keep it is, not very well, decides to strike a line with it. There's critical bits in that, and there's other bits around the Castlefield corridor that we need to get back on the Surrey said previously. Let's have a proper conversation about infrastructure, because if you don't get that right, you'll never get growth right. So there's opportunities there, and also that freight bit. We mentioned that in the campaign for business as well, about viewing freight and the equivalents as other public sector or other forms of public transport. Again, not really any of that we can see so far from government. So just to sum it up, some comments, it does feel different. Because all the growers are back in charge. But finances will be the biggest hurdle. It's interesting. Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, got asked the question, well, didn't leave like the Conservative government did. And he said, well, they've not even got enough money to buy the pad and paper. Joking, deadly serious. That is a critical issue. And again, what Clive's point said, how do you get that money? Once you get the engine going, flywheel effect, once you get that going, it will work. How do you get it going in the first place? And that's the bit we've really got to work very closely on. The clock is ticking. Every day on this is the day, nearer to not being able to achieve some of this. Contact all recommended MPs and relevant ministers. We're going to get in touch, email and writing out. We're going to be getting meetings set up. All the rest understand what business needs and is representing what the local business community is asking for here in Greater Manchester. So I'll stop there. And if anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer them.
I have a question for Lisa, but one observation. Some of the measures in the manifesto and others are deliberately vague. There are some really good numbers in there, but if you actually break them down, they're not much. So 6,500 teachers, we have 16,000 schools in England. So what is that, 0.5 teachers or less than that, right? So you're not going to actually see the impact in 5 years. This is going to be 10, 15 years of long-term investment and constant effort. But that's one thing. But Lisa and Kate, I have a question on business rates. So we have retention here in GM. We have lots of schemes which are funded through retaining business rates. How happy or worried are you if some governments are tweaking business rates?
That's one of the things that we got in the Trail-Based Devolution Deal was confirmation that we had retention for the next 10 years. So that was only 10 years. One of the things we got in the Trail-Based Devolution Deal is that we have retention for 10 years. As you say, everyone promises to reform business rates. I was in the department where they were constantly trying to do that. We had a pilot that was just being extended for areas that we were looking at to be in, because that's leading to a better position than, say, our colleagues in Sheffield. Our new CEO is putting that front and centre of engagement with the government, is that we need to have a sustainable position on business rates, and we need to retain the really currently for resale hospitality measures. And she was down in London, and she said to these people already about business rates.
Thanks. You made reference at the start about the different levels of voting in different constituencies. I think the one thing which hasn't been touched on is in some of the constituencies the majority of people didn't even bother to vote. And actually I think the question I have, because there's a lot of talk about growth, is if we all mean the same thing. And actually there's been a lot of growth in Greater Manchester, and there's an awful lot of people in Greater Manchester who have not benefited from it in any way whatsoever. So I think my question
or the issue for me is what type of growth do we actually want in Greater Manchester, and what vehicles will enable that type of growth to ensure that it benefits the whole population of Greater Manchester and not just parts of it. Because otherwise, as we've got in places like Salford, there is a tale of two cities. There is a division being built into places like Salford, like Manchester, literally being built in between those people who are benefiting and those people who aren't. So I suppose I'm slightly sceptical about this word growth just being thrown around as if we all mean the same thing. Because the risk is actually it could be growth which could divide society, could divide the economy. So I guess to me the question is what type of growth does Greater Manchester actually want to argue for, and then how do you enable that to happen?
It's a very good question. At least I don't know if you want to answer that or address that.
Power of handing over the
I think that may have been the question the last 30 years. So I don't think an answer I can give in half, 30 seconds. So that's full. But I guess if you look at the Greater Manchester strategy, the argument that has been making over the last kind of 3 years is that the growth we want to see should be fair and it should be green. And we in that we use the word prosperity as well as a way of talking about actually growth, thinking about improving the quality of life in the city region. I think things get more complicated when you then start to think about governments. It's a natural impulse wanting to point to data and statistics, and do we look at productivity or do we look at other factors? And that's one of my sort of concerns around the growth plans as well. Is will there be will we end up getting into that situation where we're arguing about measures and things like that? Hopefully we won't. But I think probably in terms of your second part of your question, it's about ensuring that there are effective public services in place. So Greater Manchester has always said that growth and reform are the two sides of the same coin. You can't have growth that will actually have an impact on a place unless the system is also making sure that people are getting access to the right skills and the right support to be able to transition to new industries, that businesses are being supported to ensure that they're creating good jobs, and that you have the right transport infrastructure. So I think in Greater Manchester we've been committed to a fair and a prosperous and a greener kind of approach to thinking about economic growth. Some people call that inclusive growth, although I haven't heard that term being used very much recently. But that has been our approach and our DNA for a long time, and I think that's what we'll try and push forwards.
Fine.
I think I slightly screw you. There's a lot of talk about sustainable growth, without defining how to do it. And I think only if we look at our work on skills, I don't think there's enough, and we sit right at the heart of that. I don't think there's enough concentration on the fact that if you don't get those people who refer to the labour market, who reside in Manchester, into the labour market over a prolonged period of time, you're failing in that. The truth is that costs you, unfortunately, infinitely more money, doesn't it? And the outcomes take further. And I think that's my problem. I think that we've really got to be incredibly brave to set out a really long, you're in the infrastructure area, starting to discussion yesterday on skills. And the end that's just one little bit of that for a systematic change to the system. You're creating equal pathways, and those pathways crossing up, doesn't matter whether you're academic, to vocational, to technical, it's going to be so incredibly long term. And you worry about the patients, you've seen the promiscuity of the voters in the last election. And we're not going to see a lot of economic progress in the next 5 years. You'll see improvement. We don't get giddy about 4% yesterday. and still getting stronger. I mean, what's the numbers otherwise? Because we have great our public services for up to years. And shutting up. So we've really got to not be frightened at all. Really open about this.
Yeah, I'll kind of just come back on that. I think we know what we've got to do. I'm not saying that it's been done. I think we know what we need to do.
I don't think that's well articulated. By the way, this is a terrific person. She's recently promoted in the these people like this working within the Command Party gives me a lot of hope for the future, and I desperately do need a lot of the point was made earlier. You know, we do lack some fundamental capacity still within our public structures in the Command Party to do all that's entailed. We might be the original success in the situation. You know, we are pretty good at it, but let's be clear, we still need a lot of resources to do this.
It's a good point that Chris made before, and he sent an email earlier in the week about how do you make it work for everybody. So again, we need to start to pick that up and get that into the
people at the wrong end of this perceive that we're trying to address it. I mean, that's a big issue.
It is a big issue. I'm not thinking we've got that immediate solution, but that is a solution. Thanks for that. Peter, just coming to you, and then just got to move on.
Just take words as inclusive growth as what we might all find into here. Just use words institutions, and really Chris has explained how much a lot of institutions have been undermined and destroyed over the last 5 to 10 years. I enjoyed your recent construction summit. I was in the audience listening to it, and even then it was what can we do next? It was always, forgive me, construction, the client or the contractor or the FU or that kind of education. I think we've all got to just review what our purposes are to start filling that gap as the way we use this institution. It's all been on demand. We're all going to stop saying it's there. We're absolutely.
Good point about the party plans. A couple of comments online. Sharon again just said around the 650,000 figure. There's an issue with labour, let alone skills, obviously aging workforce, etc. On that, our Warren Bolton, our local president, just saying there's obviously a lot of big promises up there. It's going to be a tall order for government, and just saying hopefully current government's not setting themselves up for a fall really with some of that. Only time will tell, but the key thing is we're going to make sure that where we can influence and take part and add in our experience with this, that we do our best to make it work. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to flip onto the update. I mentioned previously about the Article Skills Improvement Plan. We're still waiting on DFE to confirm what that next stage is. We've got the annual report pending. We'll share that as soon as we can do. I don't know what the long-term policy is for government, but we know locally we still need that to help drive the Mayor's ambitions around the technical education system. Restart business engagement on that. So we're going to pause it while we're doing the annual report. We're going to be starting that again next week, so please look out for opportunities to take part in that. And we're also now in the process of getting the Master Labour Market Insight Unit set up. It used to be known as the Skills Observatory. If anyone came across that, we're playing a critical part in that with the combined authority, with the growth company in mind as well, to really start to get accuracy around those skills and employment data stats in Greater Manchester. We've been approached a lot at present. Lewis and himself are doing a good double act. We've got 3 training companies on in the last couple of weeks. We've got this thing called Open Access Rail. What's that say? It's where, for example, there are gaps in the current franchise routes to put new services on. Lumo, you may have seen, want to start a Rochdale to London Euston route that goes through Manchester Victoria, stops at Eccles, Newton Willis, goes up to Warrington Bank. Virgin want to do London Euston route that comes up, goes through Manchester Victoria, goes through Bolton, currently not got any access there. We've also been approached by London North Western that want to extend their existing services into Manchester Piccadilly. There's all sorts around that, but please look out for it because because that is really a hot topic at the present moment in time. And very earlier in the week, for those of you with long memories, you can remember Andy Burnham's Death Star of the transport network. This is the new version of it, which the first time I looked at this, I didn't have the thing on at the top, and I was a little bit confused trying to work out what was what. You need that though to share this with you, but it is public knowledge now. These are, mentioned before, the AP network rail lines, through Bolton, ones that are Metrolink extensions and tram train as well. So this is what is going to be underpinning that next stage of transport expansion within Greater Manchester. And obviously that is something there. We start to get that right, delivered in around it, that will underpin growth as well. So that is pretty critical.
Chris, just an observation. I live in a cold spot on that map. So I live in Lancashire,
Right.
bordering onto Greater Manchester, and there's nothing north of Bury and Rochdale that connects into Greater Manchester, and that means that we're just linked to our counts. There's no way out there.
Yeah.
I saw that map on the TV.
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah.
not Greater Manchester, we're actually in Lancashire.
Yeah.
But I work in Wigan and I work in Manchester.
Yeah. And that's the thing with this, obviously. We've got boundaries, haven't we, in one thing and another. But hopefully, maybe under the new government, we've got to start connecting this. I mean, this line here from Wigan goes out to Southport, so I wasn't quite sure where Southport fits in the Greater Manchester. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot on there, but like I say, there's a bit of a cold spot when you start to go up there, and we definitely. So we need to look at it and make sure it works for everybody. I'm just conscious of the time. I'm going to hand back to Emma now. Thank you so much for that. And Lisa and Kate have moved those streets off now.
Okay, so just to wrap up, thank you everybody for attending today. Our next assembly will be in October, where we're going to focus on local areas, and our local presidents will be talking about that assembly. And we have also invited our Simpson, who is the new CEO of Gmcc, to talk about assembly. So look out for further details. I think I ought to just finish by wishing you good. Stranger things happen. Thank you.